This is officially the greatest college basketball conference of all time, and this is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from ESPN Central Texas. Thank you for making Locked On Big 12 your first listen every single day. BYU takes down Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse. Texas Tech falls at home to Texas in what was an effective no-show, and Houston gets the job done against Cincinnati. Let's start with the biggest upset and look, I know that Vegas didn't favor Kansas by 15 points. I know it's not the biggest spread upset of the season, but this is one that is the biggest upset to tell how deep the Big 12 is, in my opinion, all season. I think this is bigger than when Kansas went and lost on the road to UCF. We see teams lose on the road, but Kansas just fell in Allen Fieldhouse after leading at halftime, after feeling like the Stripes were probably leading one direction at points in this game. And then by the very end, BYU dominated the second half via its defense in combination with its offense to win. And to me, it proves the Big 12 is the deepest, the best conference, not just in college basketball this year, but of all time. And here's the reason why. You've had coaches like Brad Brunell at Clemson who have said, yeah, well, the Big 12 has cheated the system. We'll talk about that later in the show, how the Big 12 is not that good, and yeah, it's not historic, and the Big 12 is overrated. You hear all these talking heads now that want to spin the narrative at Field 68 or whatever it is and say the Big 12 doesn't have it. What BYU just did, they didn't beat a Texas Tech team who's having a good year. They didn't beat a team like an Iowa State who's had a good year and TJ Otzelberger, can he win in March? They didn't beat like, Cincinnati's dangerous. They beat them on the road. They beat Kansas. This team isn't just good in the context of the Big 12. They have one of the greatest coaches of all time, college basketball history, in Bill Self, and they're Kansas. They won a national championship themselves 2 years ago, and BYU just went into Allen Fieldhouse and won. It's not like this is, Kansas is not that good this year. No, they have maybe the best starting five in the country. You hear that and you're like, there's no way in the country. They're the number 7 team in America. Their depth, not great. But with the progression of Johnny Furphy, they have maybe the best starting five in the country. And BYU just went to Allen Fieldhouse and won. This isn't they got lucky. This isn't they beat that one team who was kind of good at the beginning of the year. Now they're petering out. They beat Kansas at Kansas and honestly took them out of they did. They took Kansas out of the Big 12 title hunt, and they did it by sharing minutes. Like Noah Waterman didn't have to play this entire game. He didn't have to be perfect either, though he was pretty darn good. Noah Waterman didn't have to come out and play 38 minutes for BYU to win in this game. I feel like he, better than almost anybody in the Big 12, has started to fill a role at this point. Noah Waterman doesn't have to be the star in every game. Ali Khalifa could be the star of this next game. That's fine, as long as the team wins. Last night, it was Dallin Hall, the star of the show. And that's what BYU, it feels like the adjustment Mark Pope has made is from a team that, hey, we're going to shoot a lot of threes, we're going to really try to run and gun in the offense and then see what happens from there, to, hey, let's settle in, focus, play defense, bring 4 guys off the bench. Maybe we have a couple of guys off the bench that play 25 plus minutes. Let's do it as a team and fit whatever roles we need to fit to go win games like road games at Allen Fieldhouse. I don't know if I can remember a team that had so many holes despite being good and then plugged those holes by the end of the season to seem legitimately dangerous for March. What Mark Pope has done has been an extremely impressive coaching job at BYU, now winning 20 games this season, going 8-7 in conference, and proving it's not just like, this random team can walk in the Big 12 and win. If that was the case, they'd be losing to the Kansas teams of the world. They'd be losing to the juggernauts who are beating the rest of college basketball and winning national championships. And they, pick up wins here or there. BYU is legitimate. The conference is still legitimate because they're now beating a Kansas who dominates all of college basketball. That's nuts, man. And to me, here's what I mentioned on the show the other day. To me, I'm still a little worried. Not even a little. I am. I'm legitimately worried for teams that are being upset, namely at home, or teams that are being blown out. Texas Tech gets both of those. You get the double crown here after an 81-69 loss to Texas at home, and it really wasn't even that close. It was non-competitive for a good portion. This was a no-show in one of the biggest games in United Supermarkets Arena history. Texas Tech fans were camping out for days for this. Your last opportunity to play Texas. Texas is overrated. That's what everybody wants you to feel like. Now they've clinched their spot in March Madness, bar none. Texas Tech is in March Madness, but now you're looking around and saying, oh, well, is this team legitimate after this loss? And I don't feel confident about the Red Raiders. They got blown out at home. I don't feel confident about Kansas. They were my horse throughout the Big 12 season, even more so than Houston or Iowa State up until about the last 2 weeks, because I've been telling you how I believe Kansas starting 5 can carry them in March. I still think that's the case. But I don't like when teams are losing at home, being upset at home, or being blown out. Now, that applied for Texas, too. When Texas went on the road to Kansas and got beat by 20, you got to iron out those issues. There can't be like, oh, well, yeah, there's some growing pains here. Our guys are young. You can't afford to be young at this part of the year. And then Texas goes on the road and beats Texas Tech. And it leans into the sheer chaos of what Big 12 basketball is. So right now, if you had to ask me, hey, who are those teams in the Big 12 going to be dangerous in March Madness? What do we do here? Like Houston is number 1 in KenPom, and they're the only Big 12 team in the top 10 because they are the infighting, the cannibalism is so crazy that it's buried all these teams in Big 12 KenPom between like 10 and 40, and it's just a gajillion of them. And this is tough to read. The conference itself is tough to read because of what BYU just did, because of what Texas just did. And now do we consider those two teams legitimate contenders in March? I think BYU has formed into a scary team. If BYU is a 6 seed, they are the scariest 6 seed in March Madness because the offense is so potent. The defense has adjusted so well. Remember that Cincinnati game? Felt like, oh, wow. When the shots aren't falling, the home game they lost to Cincinnati. When the shots aren't falling, will BYU be legitimate? That game at Baylor. Hey, can BYU go on the road? Mark Pope is frustrated. His team's frustrated. Then they win against Iowa State. They beat UCF on the road. You see like, oh, wow. The mix of offense and defense is actually there. That's been the case. I think it continues to be the case. And we've thrown the Oklahoma State loss out the window. We've thrown the Kansas State loss out the window, both of those being by double digits. The home win against Baylor, now road win against Kansas. BYU a lock for March Madness, and their seeding is only getting better. They'll beat TCU at home. Game at Iowa State got a lot more interesting, and they'll beat Oklahoma State at home. Mark Pope is staring down the barrel of a 22-win team at the least in the regular season this year, and that is nuts. BYU, credit to you for your adjustments. Texas Tech, the opposite. The two teams that have very similar early trajectories, and you wondered, how long can these squads keep it up? Well, for BYU, it was all season. For Texas Tech, I still don't know. BYU looks like it's playing its best basketball based on its win against Kansas. For Texas Tech, you've lost 3 of 4. That 29-point win against Kansas at home does not look near as good now. It seems so distant now, I'll put it that way. Coming up, let's talk about how the Big 12 is still very good at basketball, despite what some other coaches would want you to think. Yeah, this one's a weird one. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, and it is every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time's where I go when I need tickets. It's like, oh, wow, games today. I'm going to buy tickets at Game Time. I don't like preparing. Do you? I don't buy tickets 4 weeks in advance. So I'm not like sitting down ready for, hey, a month and a half from now, can I go see this show? Let me buy the tickets now. I want to buy it 30 minutes before because it's so much cheaper with Game Time. Last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, easy to find and buy tickets for every event in your area. Views from the seats in the venue as well. Lowest price guaranteed. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, Game Time users get $100 off a big game ticket with Vegas 100. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app and use code Vegas100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to a big game, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices. Again, Game Time, Vegas100, and all of that is guaranteed. Sometimes if we don't know what we're talking about, then we should just not talk at all. I was taught that lesson very early on, and some people don't understand that lesson. Clemson's head basketball coach, Brad Brunell, said that the Big 12 is manipulating the net. That Big 12 basketball is effectively taking the algorithm that's been built to determine the NCAA tournament teams and cheated it, that they're cheating the system. The quote from Brunell, this is per Matt Connolly of On3, says, "They're non-conference scheduling. They're playing 300-level teams and winning by 40 to 50 points to increase their efficiency numbers. Our league is actually 9-3 against the Big 12. I'll give you that a long time ago, your team, your league, your team, your league beat up on the Big 12. 9-3 is good. But what I can't give you is that the Big 12 has, in essence, cheated its way, found a weird, skirty loophole through the algorithm to make it look better. None of that makes sense. There's not a way to say, "Oh, here's how the net algorithm works. What if we can trick the analytics?" You can't trick the analytics. Also, Brad, newsflash. Here are some of the non-conference teams that Clemson played this season. You know what? I'll give you your roses first. Clemson played at Alabama, and they won. I know a lot of Big 12 teams that also played tough teams, like a Baylor and Michigan State. Kansas plays all over the country. I guess it's neither here nor there for your argument, though. Hey, you also played TCU. You beat them 74-66. You played at Memphis. How fun was that? There are some good teams in this non-conference gauntlet. But you also played UAB, beat them by 1. Winthrop, Davidson. How about Queens University? Boy, that game against Radford that you won 93-58. Were you manipulating net? Is that what that was, Brad? Is that what were you just trying to improve your net? And look, do you think that that Brett Yormark has a direct line to Ken Pom to call Ken Pomeroy and say, "Hey, Ken, can you put Houston at 1, Iowa State at 11? Could you toss in Baylor at 14, maybe BYU at 16, Kansas at 17? And while you're at it, also toss in TCU into your top 30, maybe a Texas Tech into the top 40. What about Texas and Oklahoma? Can you throw those guys in there as well?" That's not how this works. There's not we can dodge the analytics. We can dodge the robots. We can dodge the computers because we'll play some easy non-conference games. I get that the Big 12 did have a comparatively easy non-conference gauntlet to some of these conferences. If you're going to look at Ken Pom and strength of schedule, the Big 12 is not your darling. I understand that. I won't deny that. But at the same time, we are talking about teams like Kansas, Baylor, Houston, who have been to Final Fours and won national championships. They're not just doing it inside the conference. If the Big 12 was going 1 and out, 2 and done every year, the top teams weren't winning in March, then I would get it. I would understand. Be like, yeah, you're right. The Big 12 is pretty overrated here, but they're winning national championships. They're getting to the Final Four. They're going to the national championship game. And in that case, you kind of have to say, what if the Big 12 is good? It's an elite conference. And I cannot fault a team for playing an easier non-conference schedule with the knowledge that your season schedule is going to feature games against Texas, BYU, Houston, Kansas in that order. For Clemson, they had a stretch this year where they faced Virginia Tech, Boston College, Georgia Tech, and Florida State. They went 2-2 in that stretch, by the way. Then they faced Duke, followed up with Louisville, right? There are stretches like that in the ACC that you do not get in the Big 12. I don't think, my friend, that you can, you have to play a tough non-conference because your actual conference schedule is just not that good. And I say tough non-conference, you still have your tune-ups against Radford and Queens University. The Big 12 is doing what it has to do to prepare for the toughest conference schedule in college basketball history. Again, we're not talking about Alabama. Legitimately, think about this. For Alabama, they have not won a national championship in basketball. They've not gone to the Final Four in basketball under Nate Oates. That is a team where every year, the regular season, you think, oh, wow, Alabama's really good. And then in March, it just doesn't quite pan out. We've seen that with a few of these programs out in the SEC and even the ACC. In the Big 12, it's not like that. It's like, oh, Kansas is at the top. Well, they win in March, national championships. Baylor's at the top. Oh, well, they win in March, get to national championships. Iowa State's the top. Well, they've been good in. Or Kansas State's in the very middle. Well, they went to the Elite Eight. Like these schools are backing it up when it matters most in the postseason. And all you have to sit there and say is this conference is somehow fudging the numbers. This conference is playing easier. Like the algorithm is going to give you a whole lot more credit for your Brett. What if I told you? This is nuts, man. Is everybody glued? Is everybody keyed into what I'm about to say here? What if I told you they separate wins and losses into quads? I think this guy would go nuts if he found that out. They don't, that net actually doesn't weigh your game against the Little Sisters of the Blind, against Kansas. It doesn't weigh those the same. The analytics from those aren't counted the same. Right, because there are things called quads. It's quad 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Houston is 7-0 against quad 4 teams, 7-3 against quad 1 teams. Based on what net does, that quad 1 record matters more than the quad 4 record. And they get more credit because we've divvied it out than for those quad 1 wins than teams get for quad 4. Iowa State has 9 quad 4 games. They're 9-0 in those as well. They don't get as much credit for those games because they're split up into quads. That's the whole point of that. Shocking, I know. When we don't know, when we're the head coach of a program, we don't know what we're talking about. We cannot. We could just not say anything and we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Literally be cool. We'll be chilling. Oh, coming up, UNC and NC State are a package deal now. What's going on with this? This is, I don't know how I feel about it. Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is where I go to make money. It's like, rent's coming up. FanDuel. I love the idea that I can go to FanDuel and it's right there. I could easily say, hey, FanDuel, I think BYU is going to win at Kansas. Bet on it and win money. Did I do that? No, I wasn't confident enough in BYU, but I could have, and you could have, and you can enjoy deals from FanDuel right now, including $5 to win $150 in bonus bets. That's right. If you bet $5 on your favorite team to win and they win, you get $150 in bonus bets if you're a first-time customer right now, and use code FanDuel.com/locked on. Shoot your shot today with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. March Madness is coming up. You're a genius. You're a bracketologist. You can make money off of this at FanDuel. FanDuel.com/locked on. Go get you some money, $5 for $150 in free play at FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. In another developing story out in the ACC and expansion, UNC and NC State might be tied together, and that is huge if you're thinking in terms of the SEC, the Big Ten, and especially the Big 12, the conferences that could be players to get a UNC or an NC State who weren't very happy when SMU, Cal, and Stanford were added to that conference. With Florida State looking as though it's going to exit via either a settlement or scot-free, getting out, winning a lawsuit, I am confident there are other teams that are going to follow that format. In that case, NC State, UNC will be at the forefront of that. We already heard rumors that NC State and Virginia Tech have reached out to the Big 12 Conference. Maybe they will get ahead of the game because they are tied now, maybe, to UNC. This is from the News Observer, and this report says that the BOG, the Board of Governors at UNC, is meeting, and they're currently in talks to make it tougher for these two schools to operate separate from one another, almost creating a package deal, or as close as they can get to a package deal, to ensure that wherever UNC goes, wherever NC State goes, the other is treated fairly. Maybe the biggest reason for this is that NC State has a little less luster than UNC. See, the SEC and the Big Ten, there are rumors at least want to expand TV markets and see value in what UNC could provide educationally, academically, TV market, whatever it may be, to expand a footprint. For NC State, they don't get that because they're not the flagship brand. You don't want them left behind. You're the Board of Governors in North Carolina. You probably want to keep these two schools together. And that's the current conversation that's happening right now. The biggest part of this, though, is that the Board of Governors want to propose that they can block either team from changing conferences, or can almost help them navigate through major conference realignment. With the stakes being so high, there are caveats in these conversations that before UNC and NC State could do so, they have to come up with a financial plan of how they will succeed. Again, this according to newsobserver.com, how they will succeed moving forward financially. That's tough. What it really means for the athletic future, according to the site, is not totally clear. In theory, it becomes more complicated for any state school to leave its current athletics conference for another if this proposal is taken on. Some of the questions and answers this piece brings up are key when you discuss whether or not the Big 12 can land an NC State. I love the idea of Virginia Tech or NC State being catalysts in these conversations. They jump out. They don't wait on UNC or Virginia to move. And then, we have to follow them because our Board of Governors said we have to. And then the SEC says, well, we're not taking NC State because we don't want you. And we won't take UNC because you have to be with NC State. And where the Big 12 I feel like fits into that is if NC State gets to the forefront of this, and the Board of legitimately, if the Board of Governors decide these two universities, by rule, we make it a bylaw, these two universities cannot go without one another, then I don't think NC State can go to the SEC. I don't think they can go to the Big Ten either. I don't think those conferences would risk it just because they want UNC. And that gives you an opportunity for the Big 12 to create that third power conference. Look, this league needs something. If the ACC falls apart, and in a wild scenario of the 18 teams, 9 go to the SEC, 9 go to the Big 10, the Big 12 falls apart and dies. That's never going to happen, but we have to start talking about how the Big 12 can parlay better brands, can somehow land better brands like UNC or Virginia. And maybe the key to doing that is when these Board of Governors say, you school can't move without your little brother, whoever the little brother is here. So what exactly is the Board of Governors considering? It's considering a proposal that would give it the power to stop or delay a state school from moving one conference, the ACC, to another. More specifically, the board is considering amending its policy manual to require schools to provide advance notice of a potential conference move. And again, a financial plan associated with the move. All that from News Observer. That to me reeks of, hey, we know what's coming. We fear that one of these schools is going to get left behind, and they wouldn't be having those talks if they didn't understand UNC to the SEC or UNC to the Big Ten is a legitimate concern or a legitimate case. And with that being known, they want to protect NC State. They could protect NC State to the point of denying UNC an opportunity to go to the SEC because the SEC doesn't want the Wolfpack. And in that scenario, the Big 12 can luck out. There is a way in which these legalities, in which these boards and these committees could cancel out programs from joining larger conferences and ultimately benefit the Big 12. This is what creates the opportunity for UNC, for Virginia to land in this conference, along with Virginia Tech and along with NC State. For Clemson to get left behind, or Miami to get left behind as Florida State and Notre Dame try to work out where they're going to go in expansion. I know it sounds like a long shot, but there are small things, there are semantics. There's enough to hold on to for me to think that if these conversations keep happening, the Big 12 can benefit from those when the SEC and the Big 10 say, that's too much headache. We're not going to do it. And then we win. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Come back tomorrow. We'll talk more basketball and football and baseball, maybe. Yeah, even baseball. This has been and always will be. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Locked On. Thanks again for making it your first listen every single day. Dose grande.